Hello and welcome. Do you run a business, say a grocery store or a pharmacy or any other business? Or are you into practicing your profession, say you are an engineer or an architect or any other professional and wondering whether you need to obtain GST registration or not? If yes, this video is definitely for you. Today let's talk about GST registration. We'll understand when do you need to get a GST registration done, any situations in which it is not necessary to get GST registration, some basics about GST registration process, and a few pros and cons of obtaining GST registration for your business or profession. First, let us understand some of the situations in which it would be compulsory for you to get GST registration. First, if you are into supply of goods, say you run a grocery store or a pharmacy, and if your aggregate turnover, that is total sales for the year, is more than 40 lakh. Second, if you are into supply of services, say you are into providing AMC services for television, washing machine and so on, and if your aggregate turnover is more than 20 lakh for a year. Third, if you are into supply of goods and services, for example, let's say you are into providing AMC services for television. In addition to services, you would also be supplying spare parts for television. So in this situation, if your total turnover for the year is more than 20 lakh, then it would be compulsory for you to get yourself registered under GST. These threshold limits, that is 20 lakh and 40 lakh, it varies for different states and union territories. Whatever limits that I have specified here is for the state of Karnataka. Let's take a quick look at threshold limits for some of the states and union territories. For Karnataka, Maharashtra and Delhi, threshold limit if you are into supply of goods would be 40 lakh and for services it would be 20 lakh. In case of Telangana, this limit is 20 lakh for goods as well as for services. In respect of certain northeastern states, say Nagaland, this limit is 10 lakh for goods or services. Aggregate turnover here includes taxable as well as exempt supplies. For example, let's say you run a grocery store and you supply fresh vegetables on which no GST is applicable. So it is an exempt supply. You also supply sugar which is subject to GST. So that is a taxable supply. So to arrive at aggregate turnover, taxable as well as exempt supply would be considered. So in this situation, your turnover from sale of vegetables as well as turnover from sale of sugar would be added to arrive at aggregate turnover. But if this aggregate turnover is within the specified limit, that is the limit as applicable to the state or union territory in which you run your business or profession, then it would be optional for you to obtain GST registration. Fourth would be if you are registered under any other law when GST was implemented. GST was implemented on 1st July 2017. So prior to this, if you were registered under any other law, say under VAT, service tax, central excise, etc., then it would be compulsory for you to register under GST. In this situation, no threshold limit would apply. Fifth would be transfer of business. Say you sell your business to someone else, or on succession, upon death of the registered person, you inherit a business. In these situations, that is when you sell your business, the buyer, that is the transferee, and in case of succession, the successor has to compulsorily obtain GST registration. Here also threshold limit would not apply. Sixth would be if you are into interstate supply of taxable goods. Interstate supply means supply from one state to another state. In other words, if you are into supply of exempted goods, then GST registration is not required. Further, if you are into interstate supply of services, then also it is not compulsory for you to register under GST. So, if you are into interstate supply of taxable goods, then GST registration is compulsory for you. Seventh would be when you are required to pay GST under reverse charge. Normally, GST is collected by suppliers from their customers and paid by suppliers to the government. This is called forward charge. Under certain situations, that is, In case of specified goods or services, the GST is required to be paid by the buyer or recipient of service. This is called reverse charge. So if you are required to pay GST under reverse charge, that is if you buy such goods or if you avail such services, and if you are required to pay GST under reverse charge, then it would be compulsory for you to obtain GST registration. For example, if you are a business availing goods transport agency services, that is GTA services, then if you satisfy certain conditions, it would be compulsory for you to pay GST under reverse charge. In that situation, GST registration would be compulsory. Eighth would be, if you are an agent supplying goods or services on behalf of your principal, then it would be compulsory for you to obtain GST registration and no threshold limit would apply in this situation. GST registration would not be necessary in some situations. Let's now see what are those. First, if your aggregate turnover is within the specified limits, that is within the threshold limit specified for a particular state or union territory in which you run your business, then GST registration is not required. Second, if you supply only exempt goods or services, then GST registration is not required. Third would be for farmers who supply their produce that is grown out of cultivation of land, that is whatever the crops that they sell, GST registration would not be required for supply of such crops. So far we have understood some of the situations in which it would be compulsory for you to obtain GST registration. We have also gone through the situations in which GST registration is not necessary. Nonetheless, for those who have not crossed threshold limit but who still wants to obtain GST registration, there is an option called voluntary registration. That is, suppliers can apply voluntarily for GST registration even if the turnover has not crossed the threshold limit. GST provisions as are applicable to other registered taxpayers would apply even to people who have voluntarily registered. Now let us see how can you get yourself registered under GST. This can be done online by visiting the GST portal. First, let's have a quick look at the process involved. Once you cross your threshold limit or once you start your business, you need to apply for registration online within 30 days. Along with the application, you need to upload relevant documents like PAN, Aadhaar card. If the business is rented, then rental agreement. If you own the business, then sale deed, and so on. Once you submit your application, the registration would be approved in 7 to 14 days if there are no discrepancies, and GSTIN, that is GST identification number, would be given to you. Once you get your GSTIN, ensure that you comply with all the requirements of GST law like filing GST returns periodically, issuing e-way bill wherever required, and so on. GST registration is a lengthy process. If you want to do it yourself, you may do so. I have not included step-by-step process of GST registration because there are n number of videos on this topic on YouTube itself. Also, the user manual on the GST portal itself is a comprehensive one to help you register. But a hassle-free approach would be to hire a professional. This will also save your time. Now let's learn a bit more about registration. You can either register yourself as a normal taxpayer or a composition taxpayer if you satisfy certain conditions. Let's quickly understand the difference between the two. If you are a normal taxpayer, then you as a seller can collect GST from your customers and issue tax invoices. If you are a normal taxpayer and if you buy from another normal taxpayer, then you as a buyer can avail input tax credit. On the other hand, if you are registered as a composition taxpayer, then you as a seller cannot collect GST from your customers. You can issue invoice but not tax invoice. You as a seller is required to pay GST as a percentage of your turnover. This percentage varies for different category of suppliers. For example, for traders it is 1%, for manufacturers it is 2%, and so on. Further, when you are registered as a composition taxpayer, even if you make your purchases from normal taxpayers, you will not be able to avail input tax credit on your purchases. Also, your buyers, that is people who buy from you, will not be able to avail input tax credit because you will not be able to charge GST on your sales. We have now reached last part of the video, that is to understand pros and cons of obtaining GST registration. Let's see what are those. Availing input tax credit can help reduce the cost. Because if you are not registered under GST, then whatever GST that you pay on your purchases, you will not be able to avail input tax credit. So GST that you pay on your purchases would be a cost to you. But if you are registered under GST, then you will be able to avail input tax credit on your purchases, which would help you reduce your cost. Then recognition for your business or profession. Many organizations, including government companies, prefer businesses or professionals who are registered under GST. So if you are not registered, then opportunities are limited. Then easy to maintain records. I'm saying so because if you are registered under GST, then it would be compulsory for you to file periodic returns like GSTR1, GSTR3B, etc. So GST portal can be a database for you to fetch your records. Now let us see some of the disadvantages. If you get yourself registered under GST, your burden of compliances would increase. You would be required to file periodically GST returns, issue e-way bills wherever required, generate e-invoices if you satisfy certain conditions, and so on. Next, levy of penalty for non-compliance. If you are liable to register under GST and if you don't get your registration done within the time specified, then penalty would be levied for non-compliance of provisions of GST. Then increase in the cost of operations. When GST was implemented, it was envisaged that the cost of operations would come down because of seamless flow of input tax credit. But today, this is far from truth because we have a lot of restrictions to avail input tax credit. Also, we see a lot of amendments being introduced and it is hard for anyone to keep track of all these changes. So this has also contributed to the increase in cost of operations. That's all I have for you in this video. Hope this was helpful. If you enjoyed this episode, you may like and share the video. Thank you for watching.